Welcome to Bed Crime Stories podcast. I'm your host, T. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, bed crimers. As always, I wish you the best. To anyone new here, a warm welcome. Thank you for checking out my channel. Let me just ask that after listening to or watching this video, if you learned something or enjoyed it, please do me a favor and smash that like button. Now, let's dig in. Good morning, bed crimers. Today I want to share some additional information regarding the case that Idaho is building against suspect Bryan Kohberger, who is accused of taking the lives of four precious souls: Ethan Chapin, Xana Kernodle, Kaylee'S, and Madison Mogan. These are some details about Kohberger's upcoming preliminary hearing on June 26th. I gleaned these details I'm about to share with you from my friend Lori Hellis, also known as the Good Lori, who is a retired defense attorney. Lori is writing a book called Children of Darkness and Light about the Lori Vallow-Chad Daybell case, and she will be attending Lori Vallow-Daybell's upcoming trial on April 3rd. And in fact, Lori Hellis has even moved to Idaho because of the case, the trial, and her upcoming book. So in a recent show, Lori Hellis explained additional information about preliminary hearings that I found helpful. She explained that in all U.S. states, in order for a felony to move forward to the indictment stage, the facts and the evidence have to be presented either to a grand jury or to a judge in a preliminary hearing. Per Hellis in Idaho, cases typically go to a preliminary hearing instead of a grand jury, and we know that Bryan Kohberger will be having a preliminary hearing on June 26. Now, there will not be any cameras in the courtroom for the hearing, unfortunately, and that's because of the judge's incredibly broad gag order. Unless something changes by June, there won't be cameras there. And apparently it's highly unusual to have such a wide sweeping gag order, and Hellis believes that it will likely face some constitutional challenges. We know that many media outlets have filed suit in the case to have the Idaho Supreme Court decide if the gag order is too broad. Hellis also talked about who makes the final decision as to whether or not a trial will be live streamed in Idaho. Per Hellis, the judge overseeing the case has the final word on whether or not cameras and media access are allowed. And for that reason, the judge's decision is not appealable to the Idaho Supreme Court. That's why in the Lori Vallow-Daybell trial, the media can't do anything about Judge Stephen Boyce's order that no cameras be in the courtroom. Boyce is the final authority on that issue, and unfortunately, his decision is causing a lot of problems, not just for media outlets and us true crime YouTubers who want to follow the trial. It's also posing problems for some family members who are hoping to watch some of the trial from their homes and their home states. Not everyone is able to easily pack up and decamp to Idaho for a 6 to 8 week trial. J.J. Vallow's adoring grandparents, Kay and Larry Woodcock, have expressed disappointment in Judge Boyce's ruling. And that's upsetting because their desire to watch every second of that trial should be accommodated, in my opinion. They've suffered so much with the traumatic loss of JJ and Tylee and Kay's brother, Charles Vallow. You would think that the judge would try to be thoughtful about their wishes. In the Bryan Kohberger case, the situation is slightly different. Media outlets are appealing the judge's gag order, which, according to Lori Hellis, is an interim order. Hellis also further explained that those 60 court filings that were recently released regarding search warrants served to various entities, she said that it looks like the investigators wanted to cast a wide net to look for any and all possible evidence. So basically, the investigators just blanketed everyone they thought Kohlberger might have talked to or interacted with, same with the victims. It doesn't mean those companies will necessarily have any useful information, but if they do, they have to share it with law enforcement. Kaylee'S explained that all the search warrants for banks were not because they knew that all the students and Kohlberger were banking at those institutions. Rather, it's possible that just some of the students were banking at some of those banks. The investigators are just being ultra thorough. Investigators, according to Kaylee'S, always like to look at a victim's and a suspect's financial records because those are often indicative of what was going on in that person's life before and around the time of the crime. Kaylee'S also said that some people were wondering why it took so long for some of the search warrants to be served. She explained that for Idaho law enforcement to serve search warrants to companies that are headquartered in states other than Idaho, they have to first send those search warrants to law enforcement in that other state. And then the other state's law enforcement authorities are the ones who deliver the search warrants. Let me give you an example. The Idaho investigators could not directly serve the search warrant for the company called Match Group. Match Group owns Tinder, but Match Group is headquartered in Dallas, Texas. So the Idaho authorities had to first send that search warrant to law enforcement in Texas, and then the authorities in Texas had to deliver the warrants to the Match Group. So all of that obviously took extra time. I find it fascinating that as we learn about these various true crime cases, we're also learning things about the American justice system and how it all works. I know I'm learning new things. Today, I also wanted to share some fascinating audio from a case out of Wisconsin, which is where I was born and where I grew up. And in fact, one of the people in the case, the defendant's ex-girlfriend, actually lives in the same small town where I grew up. And that's what kind of drew me to this trial. It's called the Obsessed Ex-Boyfriend Murder Trial. And it involves a guy named Zachariah Anderson. And he's on trial for the death of Rosalio Gutierrez in 2020. Gutierrez was dating Anderson's ex-girlfriend, a woman named Sadie Beecham. She's the one who lives in my same small town. Anderson and Beecham never married, but they dated on and off for many, many years. And they had a daughter and then 2 young boys together. When Sadie Beecham finally broke up with Zach Anderson, he allegedly went off the rails. He was basically stalking her as well as her new boyfriend, Rosalio Gutierrez. I bring this case up because one of Anderson's cellmates in jail testified at trial about Anderson allegedly telling him how he went about following Gutierrez and keeping tabs on both him and Sadie Beecham. This reminds me of the 12 visits the Moscow police said Bryan Kohberger'S car, at least, made to the female victim's neighborhood near the home at 1122 King Road prior to the crime. Take a listen to what this cellmate of Zachariah Anderson, what he says Zach told him.
What was said next? What did the defendant tell you?
Well, he spoke indirectly. Starting off, he wasn't pretty much trying to say everything that he did. I felt like he was held back, but he said that, well, if you gotta know a person, you gotta learn a person, you gotta be able to know, where they live, how they move when they leave, what they drive. And then he told me, one way of knowing when a person is gonna be a certain area is GPS tracking. And he told me Amazon sold GPS tracking that you can put on people's car.
So in case you didn't hear that clearly, the cellmate claims that Anderson allegedly told him that he did take Gutierrez's life and that prior to committing the crime, he took time to learn who Gutierrez was, where he lived, what type of car he drove. Anderson also allegedly mentioned GPS to track his victim. The cellie said that Anderson told him that Amazon sells GPS tracking devices that you can put on someone's car to know their whereabouts at all time. I think what Anderson may have been telling this cellie about is, if it's true, Apple AirTags. You can buy these things and you can put them on someone's car without that person knowing about it, and then you can see their location at any time. I think it's very possible that Bryan Kohlberger could have put one of those devices on whichever of the female students he was obsessed with. It would have been very easy for him to figure out which vehicle parked outside the house on King Road belonged to that girl, and maybe during one of those 12 visits to the neighborhood, he could have gone there at night and secretly put an AirTag on her car. In that way, he would have known where she was at any given time. Talk about an invasion of privacy. Hey, did you guys hear that Kaylee'S Gonsalves's dog is getting a lot of online fans, and he even has his own Amazon wishlist? The dog is named Murphy. That's the golden doodle, and he's been living with Kaylee'S ex-boyfriend, Jack DeCour. Well, guess what? Murphy has an Instagram account, and he's got more than 100,000 followers. And last week, Gonsalves's grieving family gave Murphy's fan a new update about his life on the Gonsalves family page on Facebook. They revealed that Murphy is living his best life and gets to go on many adventures with his owner. They also created that Amazon wish list, and it says, "Hello, this is for everyone that's asking about Murphy. Murphy is living his best life with Jack." They wrote, "Murphy is very happy and gets to go on many adventures. A lot of people have asked if they can send him stuff, so we made him a wish list on Amazon. We want you all to know that this is just a wish list and not a need list, and we will be donating many things to our local animal shelter in Murphy's name. The only thing besides God that our family needs is all of you. We are so blessed to have all of your support, well wishes, and prayers. Much love to all of you." The wish list, titled Murphy's Doggy Donations, includes items such as chew toys, dog car seatbelts, and pet blankets. Several social media users left messages of support on the family's Facebook post. "I hope Jack is getting as much love and comfort from Murphy as Murphy Boy is from him and the world. We still love and support you all immensely," one person wrote. Another person wrote, "I will definitely be sending Murphy some treats. Much love to you all. Hugs. Until the next time on Bed Crime Stories." Hey, do me a favor, smash that like button, subscribe to my channel, leave me a comment, consider a membership if you like the work I'm doing, and I'll see you next time.
How did he do it? What was said next? What did the defendant tell you?
Well, he spoke indirectly. Starting off, he wasn't pretty much trying to say everything that he did. I felt like he was held back, but he said that, well, if you gotta know a person, you gotta learn a person, you gotta be able to know, where they live, how they move when they leave, what they drive. And then he told me, one way of knowing when a person is going to be a certain area is GPS tracking. And he told me Amazon sold GPS tracking that you can put on people's car.
Did he use a